Okay, so we're here with the Ryzen Master with my AMD Ryzen 3700X. We're gonna overclock. Well, we're gonna put it at the maximum clock speed at 1.5 volts. Now, I think it's just not going to be it. The voltage is too high, I think. So we're going to lower it in a minute. But first, we're going to do some quick 60-second tests on, see where it ends up. Okay. So the temperature should heat up very quickly on here. In fact, there will be over temperature because it's just not going to be. The system is just a default cooler that you get a Ryzen Prism, which is kind of flashes lights, but it's quite good normally. But with this 1.5 volts at 4 gigahertz, it's just not powerful enough. But let's show you what I mean here. Execute. So immediately up to the limit of temperature. So this is too high. If it's running, if your system is running at 90 degrees, it's not powerful enough anyway, or not cool enough anyway. So it's already hit 100 degrees. And it will keep on rising till it CPU suddenly says I'm too hot and shuts off. But we should be finished before that. There you go. So 4,000, a little bit higher than the last score I did, but that was at a slightly lower clock and power usage. So we're going to do the same thing just for curiosity's sake. So now just about hit 100 degrees and it's over. So yeah, 2,000. Though on a similar test I did actually get a higher score, but I am doing the screen capture, so I won't get the performance. But this is too hot. I can't run it on that kind of performance. But we can go a bit down, but it's still going to be a bit too hot to run, in my opinion. Apply, execute. So we're going to try that again. Benchmarks, it should. Temperature should be more stable. Okay, run. So straight away, in this case it was at 95 with the 1.5 volts. Wattage is higher than I would like as well. We're done. So a little bit less than I had a minute ago, I think. Let's try so at 4,807. So let's try this with that benchmarks. So temperature hits quickly 90 watts. Not that that's a problem, I've got enough power supply, but it's obviously a lot more wattage than would be generally good for. Oh, we hit 90 degrees. So now we're in the red area, so it's, in my opinion, anything above 90 degrees is too hot. Anyway, it would shut down about 110, probably shut down as if it hit that level. CPU. So yeah, it's a little bit less points. It was 4,807. Now it's gone down a bit, but it's still too hot for full performance that I would be comfortable with. So I'm going to put it down to 3.25, and I'm going to take the wattage down to keep the system cooler as well, because we don't need as much power to the, because the voltage is what gives the heat. So more voltage, more heat. So you want to keep the voltage relatively low, but if you get too low you won't have enough to keep with the frequency. So it's a kind of a bit of a kind of trying to get the right values to suit the kind of wattage you got or output. So that should be in there. Now it's set to what I want. You can see that it's set at 4.3 on Windows. You can also use my other benchmarks. Apparently going red here. It signs red if it goes above 100 here, and it shouldn't. You shouldn't really. If you're using an operating system and it goes above 100 degrees on your CPU, you really got to sort out what's making the CPU go a bit too hot. In this case it's because I'm overclocking. It wouldn't normally get above this temperature. So CPU is now at 54. I've executed that. Temperature, it's at 3.322. So let's start with this one first. So temperatures, so much more stable in temperature, not a sudden 90 degree heat immediately or 80. So it's gonna go into the 80s, but it should stay above that. Should stay below 90 degrees. Let's try the so I think I got 123 on the frames per second on OpenGL, so I don't think it makes much difference, to be honest. Whatever game I run, most of the games seem to be very GPU dependent, so it doesn't make any difference, or much difference at least. Oops, the car crashed. Ford Cinema 4D 135. Alright, let's run Cinebench 20, see what the score is for this one. did get a higher score. Highest score was 2244, but I wasn't running video capture, so it's going to be slower just because of that. It's the temperature. So we're at 82 degrees. See the wattage. 74 watts. So 4699. So a little bit less than it again than the highest score that I've got. Cinebench 20, which was 40807, I think, a moment ago. Okay, so I've started up R23. We're going to see, we're going to put custom preference. We're going to just do 2 minutes. I think we'll just do 2 minutes because otherwise it'll take ages. 2 minutes with R23 at full with the overclock. Oops, R23. Okay, here we go. So I've done a 30-minute test earlier with this combination. So this is a custom 30-minute stability test. And it does it roughly without, obviously I'm using video capture, so it will be slower, but I did get 13,000 for 30 minutes and it was quite stable. The temperature just hit at the edge of 80, about 89, just hit the 90 a few times. It was about 83 watts for the majority, somewhere around there, hovering around that temperature or wattage. And the temperature is about 89 for the most part. So obviously I'm running video capture, so it will be less than the 13,100. The highest score when I tried the 4.4 gigahertz at 1.5 volts was 13,495. But obviously it's just not, I wouldn't be comfortable running, it wouldn't work, you couldn't run any major rendering with that kind of temperature. It's just too hot, and I think this temperature power level is just about right. It's the sweet spot, I think, where you get just enough power and speed without over, well, the power's at 1.42 volts. So yeah, so it's just in that this is roughly what you'd get at with the default if I wasn't using the screen capture to talk about this. So you'd get about what, 12,200 with default manufacturers. So it's about 1,000 almost 1,000, or roughly 1,000 points more with the setup I've got here. So yeah, I think for if I want to do any render, it doesn't make a huge difference, because it's with this it's just to render one of these images on R20 and R23. This picture just takes 1 minute exactly to render. So an hour, that'd be 60 minutes if you, from the default is a 65 seconds, so that would be only like 5 minutes in 1 hour. So you wouldn't notice that much of a difference. It'd only be a big difference if you were trying to render an image that took an hour to render. So the default would take 5 minutes longer than the raised clock speed, because the default runs at about 4,000 megahertz when under full load. So it doesn't make a huge difference really in the performance, not a huge amount. But if it was base clock right from the beginning, for example, you had it at 1.5 gigahertz, 3.5 gigahertz, then would make a large difference in performance, about 25-30% performance, I'd say. It takes, for example, so if it takes a minute to render an image, it would take at 1.5 gigahertz, which is the base speed of this CPU, which is 3.59. Then it would, so it took about 1 minute. I've timed it with the base speed at 1 minute and 21 seconds. So that's 21 seconds longer than it's about a third of 1 minute. So it's about 30% slower. So about roughly 35% slower at base speed than it is with this. And if we take the default option, which comes with it, you don't need to do a lot. It is a little bit more temperature initially, and it's good for single core, because it takes, with the default, it powers the single cores at the 1.4 gigahertz or near enough to there. So, but obviously running all the cores produces a lot of heat, so obviously I'm overheating at 1.5 volts at 4.4 gigahertz. So you can't have the same configuration as you would with the default doing, because it's only, you could do 1.5 volts and 4.4 and just run the single core performance, but obviously multi-core, the temperature is just too high, so you have to bring it down. Even 1.4 gigahertz at 1.4 volts is in the 90% range, which is higher than I would prefer to be. I prefer to keep it about under 90 degrees C, which is kind of the red line for most, the temperature here flashed up red when it hit 90, so 60. So yeah, about 20. So the default's about 24.6% faster than so the default's 26% faster than the base speed. So, and for terms of this clock, 4.3 gigahertz, you're only getting, let's see, so 60 seconds, 65 divided by 60, so yeah, only about 8%, 8.3% faster, approximately, for 1.3 325 gigahertz from the default setting. So we're going to set this back to default because I don't want to, I prefer to have it on default.